Do you ever wonder why God allows some people to do quote unquote big things and other people never get the chance? Well, this might bother you sometime because you might think, how come some people, they get the big ministries and they have all these excellent opportunities, but it just never comes my way? Well, I hope that this will help you out a little bit. It's a little different than most of my videos because it's a little more devotional minded, which isn't usually the angle I go for. But what I try to do on this channel is to talk about what we believe, why we believe it, and how it affects our lives. And so this does affect our life because we can get discouraged sometime. Maybe you've been discouraged before, and whatever it is that you do, whether you're in full-time ministry or not, might get discouraged because you're thinking, how come some of the people, some of these other people that I know or that I read about, man, they get the big names and everything they do just seems to be successful and not me. Okay, maybe this will help you out. There are many people whose names in Christianity everybody knows, names like Charles Stanley, David Jeremiah, John MacArthur, these kind of people, they get the book contracts, they get the television time. I mean, it just seems to always work out for them. And they don't even have to really be good at what they do, maybe in a particular book or something. Just their name sells it. People just buy it just because of who wrote it. And then there's some other people who maybe their names aren't quite as well known, but they seem to do pretty well too. And, some of the people that I like to follow, as far as a lot of good teaching. It doesn't mean I agree with everything that they teach, but they have a lot of things that I can really learn from are people like Greg Koukl, Frank Turek, Mike Winger, John Lennox, and the list goes on and on of people. Maybe they're not household names, but they just seem to really do well. God has gifted these people with incredible ability, and he's given them great opportunities to be able to do some things that most of us probably are never going to be able to do. And then there's other people out there. Someone might be a pastor of a little tiny church that meets out in the cornfield somewhere. There might be someone who's in a jungle and they're bringing medicine in God's name to the people out there. Or someone who their ministry is bringing food to sick people. And they see these people who have national airtime and everyone sees them as so successful. And then the other folks just start to feel like, man, for some reason, I just don't add up. Okay, how come these people are so-called successful, and we'll put that in quotation marks, and it doesn't work for me? Maybe you've never written a book, you've never been successful in a podcast or a YouTube channel, and nobody other than a few people around you even really know that you exist. And you want to be like those big guys. Okay, let me be one of the big guys. Let me be well known. My question is, what would God have to say about this? Well, I think that God sometime would appreciate our passion for wanting to do great things. He might simply say this: stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. So I was thinking about this just this morning. I was reading 1 Chronicles chapter 17, and this is where King David decided, I want to build a house for God. He said, I live in this great house, and God is in a tent. The Ark of the Covenant was kept in a tent. So I just want to show you something here from 1 Chronicles chapter 17, verse 1. Now it came to pass when David was dwelling in his house that David said to Nathan the prophet, see, now I dwell in a house of cedar, but the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord is under tent curtains. Then Nathan said to David, do all that is in your heart, for God is with you. So David, he's like, I'm going to build a house. I'm going to build something here for God. This is a great thing. I don't think anybody would say, now, David, that's what a self-serving thing. You shouldn't do that. And even the prophet Nathan, he's like, of course God is going to want him to do this. I mean, that just stands to reason. And so everyone goes home happy. Well, that night, God comes to Nathan the prophet in a dream, and he says, no, I do not want David to do this good thing. Skipping down to verse 11, right here. And it shall be when your days are fulfilled. This is what Nathan needs to tell to David. Now, you can't build a house. Your son is going to. It shall be when your days are fulfilled, that when you must go to be with your fathers, that I will set up your seed after you, who will be of your sons, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build me a house, and I will establish his throne forever. And so God comes to David and said, David, you are not going to be the one to build this house for me. I'm going to set up your son. Your son will be the one who builds this house, and you're not to do that. Now, this just really is kind of astounding to me, because here is something that David wanted to do that was arguably a good thing. He wanted to build a house for God. He's like, wait a minute, I have spent so much time and energy conquering the area, conquering, all this land for Israel and building my own house. What about God? Man, I've forgotten about God, so I'm going to do something for him. And God said no. Now, the question is, why would God tell him no? Why would God tell him, no, you cannot do this thing for me. You cannot do what seems to be a great thing for me. And I think part of the reason is that was not David's lane. That was not what God enabled David to do. David was a warrior. David had spent his life trying to stabilize the nation of Israel. And architecture was not necessarily his thing. If he would have taken on the role of building the temple himself, it might not have been as good as it was when Solomon came along, because when Solomon came along, he built on the stability of the nation that his father had given, and he was then able to focus entirely on building the temple using supplies that David had raised, and it made a much better temple than David ever could have done, because for David, it would have been kind of a side project. He was a warrior. He was fighting the battles. Solomon didn't have to deal with that. He had peace for the most part in his time, so he was able to really focus on building the temple. And God said, that's what Solomon will do. That's not what David would do. And this is what I think we can learn from that. God did not give us the ability to do everything, but he gave us the ability to do something. God gave David the ability to consolidate this kingdom and to make it strong and ready to move on. And then Solomon was able to come in. Solomon was able to come in and he was able to build on that because they each had a job. David was a warrior. Solomon reigned in peace. And there was nothing any better or worse about either one. It's just the situation they had. And God had enabled each of them. He had given each of them the abilities and opportunities because there was something specific that he wanted them to do. Now, I think in my own life of a situation like this, if you're a part of our church here at Eastlake, or if you know anything about it, you know that I often describe the history of Eastlake as a miracle. I'm not going to get in all the details right now, but in the early 2000s, the pastor before me came in, and his job here, looking back, I think everyone would agree, his job looking back was to stabilize the church. It came in some difficult times, and he stabilized the church. And eventually, really what I would call the crowning achievement of his time here was he took two churches and he reconciled them back together. Obviously, it was God, and there were a lot of people involved, but he was kind of the driving force behind this. And then God took him out of here. And that's when I came in early 2017, and I didn't have to deal with that. When I came into this church, it was very strong emotionally, spiritually, financially. We just didn't have to fight those kind of battles. So it was almost like Solomon. I could come in and build on what had been laid. Now, God had a job for him, and God has a job for me. When we came in, the church was ready. We did a major renovation of our parking lot, major renovation of it. And then we moved inside. We renovated a part of the building. Most of that was a gut job. And now we're getting ready here in a couple of weeks to pretty much gut and renovate our auditorium. Well, this couldn't have been done 15 years ago. That was not the time. So when the previous pastor came in, he worked hard at that and he did his job here, and God moved him somewhere else. And then God brought in different people. He skilled us in different ways. Okay. He's given us different jobs, different abilities. And so it'd be wrong for us to sit there and think, I wish I had that skill. Or I wish I had that. I wish I could do that other thing. How come those guys get the glory for this? God gives each of us a job. Now, that doesn't mean don't ever try to push the boundaries a little bit. That doesn't mean sit back and say, okay, I'm just going to not do anything until God comes and just puts this opportunity in my lap. No, we have to try. We have to keep pushing and trying to do the best we can, try to aim for bigger things. But sometimes God will say, you know what? That's not your job. You need to stay in your lane. You need to be content where you are, and you need to work as hard as you can, because ultimately it's not about getting a big name. It's not about, being this huge author or letting everybody know your name. That's not what it's all about. It's about serving God. It's about bringing glory to God. And if we can do that in the place that God has given us to serve, we have succeeded. So I like to think of it this way. We can summarize it this way. Stay in your lane, but drive as hard as you can. Okay. I hope that's a blessing for you, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless.